promise. No matter what we're going through with Jesus, it is well with our soul. And the story behind this, I don't know if you all know, but there was a family, and husband lost, I think it was his daughters at sea in the ship that went down. And it was a very hard time for him, but the Lord inspired him to write these words: "Though the sea billows roll, it is well with my soul."
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed that music. And I want to know where the little girl is who said, wow, I love those flowers. Anyway, where is she in the back there? There she is. Thank you. I heard you say, wow, I love those flowers. That girl is just like me, man. I love flowers. So just want to tell you thank you. I'll wave at you a little bit there. Yeah, thank you. So one of my favorite Bible texts, you're gonna hate me for this, but it's actually found in Acts chapter 20. And I won't quote it to you. I'll just remind you of where it is. See, so Paul, he's in Troas. He's getting ready to leave. And what does he do? He starts telling mission stories. And he tells mission stories, and he goes and goes and goes until midnight. And then past midnight, and he's still going. And people are falling asleep. One of them actually falls out the window. And so Paul goes out there, touches him. I don't know what happens, but he says, no, look, he's still alive. Everything's fine. And what does Paul do? Does he get the hint and go home? No. He goes back and continues preaching, right? So that's me today. I just want you to know, right? So, yeah, I want to talk about missions, and they're my passion. I really love the work that's taking place in the mission field. I think I think we need to have that little shot on the arm once in a while, just a reminder that God has work that needs to be done, right? And if we don't have a place in it, we need to ask ourselves, where is our spot? Because it's empty. Everybody needs to have a place in building God's kingdom. Thank you. Why does only one person say amen? Thank you. Lord God, we'd like to thank you for your love and your mercy. And this wonderful opportunity that we have this morning to talk about missions, to talk about the passion of Jesus. I pray that you help us, Lord God, to understand that passion, to share that passion. Please guide what's spoken and what's heard and what's thought today for Christ's sake. Amen. So we have a few PowerPoint slides here. And that first one there, you'll notice, is taken from the book of... I'm so glad you folks are awake. So if you know where Ephesians is, it's Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. So if you're looking for it, it's between Galatians and Philippians. And we're looking at chapter 4. Some of the texts I have, I have written them down. You'll be able to look at them real easily here. This one I thought, it'd be good if people actually look it up in their Bibles. If they have a pen, put a little dot right there so they don't forget it. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11, it says, and he himself gave some to be, you shout the word out for me, apostles, and some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers. So he himself gave some to be what? Apostles, prophets, evangelists, and some pastors and teachers. So I qualify there just because I'm a teacher, right? So I barely caught that list. Okay, so what did he give them to him for? So he gave these gifts to who? To the church. Yeah, the saints. So he gives this gift to the church. What for? It does not say entertainment. I just want to point that out. Okay? It doesn't say for entertainment. What does the word edify mean? It means to instruct or to improve somebody. To instruct or improve them, right? You're actually helping them to develop. Okay? And so this long list, the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers are there to equip. What does the word equip mean? Yeah, to provide the tools and equipment they need, or the armor, whatever it is, just to help ensure they have everything they need to what? Do whatever they're supposed to do. And what are they supposed to do? Equipping them for the work, equipping the saints for the work of ministry. So that's my job. Just want to clarify what my job is today. As a teacher, my job is to what? Equip the saints for the work of ministry. That's what I'm here for. So I didn't bring a lot of armor with me, but I did bring a few discipleship tools. I'd like to share those tools with you. And I want you to notice I'm wearing a vest. And some people ask me, why am I wearing a vest? And my good friend Sifa says, man, you're all duded up today. That was a few months back. But I like pockets, right? And my job today is to fill your pockets, your discipleship pockets up with discipleship tools, right? So I want to just give you some tools you can work with, some insights you can walk away with and say, I've been edified today, right? And you're better equipped for the work of ministry. Okay, so, and I don't have a little clicker, so I'm just going to, all right. So what I want to do is just introduce a sermon style. I love this sermon style. So with this sermon style, I preach a sermon, or Pastor Mike would preach a sermon. Okay, so once the sermon's done, what happens next? We have a break, eat lunch, and then what happens? We get together again, we have a discussion on the sermon. Okay, so there's a discussion on the sermon, and then people are challenged to go out there, take what they've learned, and apply it, right? So this gives more people a chance to engage the sermon and make sure that it's not just a piece of entertainment. So you come in the sermon, in the church, listen to what's going on, and then you walk out, and everything is the same as it was before. Like, we don't want that. So I don't have that option today. So what I will do is say that when the sermon is done, I like to just take 3 minutes, just to give you like 3 minutes, right? Just to talk to the guy next to you and just say, listen, I've gained this from this sermon today. Okay? And I'd like to challenge myself to grow in this way. Or, I think we have room for improvement in the church, and maybe we need to just work towards that. So that's my goal when I have the sermon. And then rather than having a major discussion, I want to just give you the 3-minute challenge, just to think about it for a minute, discuss with the first person next to you, then we'll have a little prayer together. Thank you. So I'm going to give a mission report to help prepare you to understand the mission report. I want to give you a little bit of an outline on. So I train missionaries to be missionaries. Like, that's part of my job. And so there's a few Bible verses that we use in doing that. I wanted to share those Bible verses and share what I pulled out of those Bible verses that I want missionaries to remember. So we have this mission. So Matthew 28, 18 to 20 says, go therefore and make. Now I want you to notice it doesn't say allow discipleship to happen. What does it say? So what is the word make in tone? Like, it's very intentional. You're doing it on purpose. So you're making disciples. You're not just preaching and hoping the disciples come to be. You're actually making disciples. Very intentional. Make disciples of who? All nations. Okay. And the word nations does not mean political nations. We're not talking about Americans, Canadians. We're talking about ethnic nations. So it's a reference to Navajo Indians, Cherokee, Comanche. Okay. We're talking about nations, right? So go make discipleship of all the. How many? All of them. All the nations, baptizing them. Baptizing means immersing. Okay? You're immersing them in what? The name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And you're what? Teaching. Okay? So not just like informing, you're teaching. You're teaching them to do what? Observe. Like when we say we're observing Thanksgiving, what does that mean? You're actually doing it. Okay, so to observe or to practice all things. How many? All. Okay, so all things that I have commanded you. What's the last thing he just commanded him to do? Go and make disciples. Right? So you're teaching his new disciples to put into practice everything he taught. Okay? Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So I'm going to be with you. He's assuring us that. And he starts off by saying, look, all authority has been given me in heaven and on earth, therefore, go and make disciples. He starts off by saying, listen, I'm the one that's got all authority everywhere. And then he ends off by saying, I'm going to be with you. And between that, he says, listen, go and make disciples. So that's like a major piece of what I want to I do. I teach people how to effectively do that, right? So to me, that's a big deal. To do that here is one thing. When we all speak the same language, all share the same culture. It's a little bit different to do that in a different language and a different culture where people think completely differently than you do, right? So my job is wrestling with that component, how to do this in a different culture group. Okay, next. So 2 Timothy 2, 1 and 2. You therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that's in Christ Jesus, and the things you have heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men who will be able to what? Teach others also. So Paul writes other places. He said, listen, I wasn't taught by just anybody. He said, Jesus taught me. So Jesus teaches Paul. Paul teaches Timothy. Timothy is supposed to teach faithful men, and faithful men are supposed to what? Teach others. So that's this little, like a string, right? It just starts here and just keeps on going. So Paul teaches Paul. Paul teaches Timothy. Timothy teaches faithful men. They're going to teach other people. Again, just like we go and make disciples, teaching them to observe everything I taught, and the last thing he taught was to make disciples, that cycle just keeps going. And this cycle here does what? It just keeps on going. We just keep teaching, keep making disciples. That's what Christ needs to happen for the world to be evangelized. Like he needs that to happen, for all of us to find our place in that process. Okay? Everybody find a place in that process. Next. So Jesus teaches Paul. Next. So the early missionary focus back in 1994, my wife and I first became missionaries. We were taught church planting. You're there to plant a church. And we have a building. We've got pews. We fill those pews up. And in the front, we have a preacher, and his job is to preach, right? And your job was to sit there and listen. And when the church is over, you go home, and I go home, and we did it, right? It's all done. And so we plant churches. We establish these little groups of people that do this. Okay. So, and to be successful, we wanted to make sure that this church, when the missionary left, that like if I was the missionary, when I left, that you would keep coming to church, right? And you'd be able to financially support the church on your own. And you could fill the pulpit, right? So this thing we have going on here would continue to go on in my absence. That's what we were thinking. The church needed to be self-governing, their own leaders, self-supporting, self-propagating. That you would actually do evangelism and bring more people inside, okay? And self-theologizing. If you had a question or a concern, you would know how to go to the Bible and find the answer for that. Okay, those are the four. It started off with the top three, and then the fourth one was added. And, okay, so so that was in place. So the concern isn't if they can do that, because it's possible. So, we have enough money. We can support the work. We can support it. But our concern wasn't, can you do it, but what? Are you doing it? Are you actually supporting the work? Are you actually self-propagating? Are you growing? Okay, do you have the pockets? Do you have the skill sets you need? Have you been equipped for propagation? Have you been equipped for, reaching out and bringing people inside? And are you actually doing that, right? That would be our concern. We want to make sure that's actually happening. And that when you do have, spiritual questions, that you are actually getting together. Let's get a group together. We'll dig in the Word. We're going to find an answer for that. Are we actually doing that? It's one thing to say, okay, I know how. I have a concordance. I know how to do that. It's different to say, okay, I know how, or are you actually doing it? Okay, so our concern in church planning is make sure that not just that they know how, but that they're, doing it, right? Okay. And that's one of the things that really stands out to me with Christ and his teaching. He kept saying, Blessed are those that hear these sayings of mine and do it. It's one thing to hear, it's another thing to hear and do, right? Okay. So later on, missionary focus shifted a little bit. So we began to realize it's possible to have a church that stands up and speaks. You can get more members, and they can support their work. It's possible to have the four selves and still be a dysfunctional church. It's possible. And you can multiply dysfunctional churches. Where the evangelists bring people in and the church members chase them out, right? It's possible to have dysfunctional churches. So we began to realize, look, we need to do the church planting, but we also need to make sure we do discipleship, right? So we're actually discipling and helping people to grow and mature as Christians. So they're not just church members, they're actually growing and maturing disciples. They're actually investing in other people, and that they're intentionally wanting to grow and develop as Christians, right? And they know how to do that. Okay, so then we're more pockets now. It's not just how to plant a church, but how do we grow and develop people? Are you with me today? Okay, so as we began shifting towards discipleship, people got the idea, well, we need discipleship movements so that not only we growing and developing people, but they know how to grow and develop other people, and they can grow and develop other people, and that can happen. So we're all just keep working together. If you're a mom, that's fine. You can help grow and develop other moms. If you can stand up and speak to large groups, you can do that. But what if you can't do that? Can you do that with another parent of a child in the same school that your kid goes to? Can you do that with somebody that you meet at the coffee shop? Can you do it on a very small scale? Is it possible you're a great cook? Is it possible to take your cooking skills and somehow use those to meet other people in the community, right? Like, how can we take the skills that God's given to you and use those skills to build God's kingdom? So there was this emphasis on discipleship movements. And I noticed over time that the focus shifted from being focused on discipleship, being focused on movements, right? So again, the focus was on the growth as opposed to actually helping people develop. And I think we need to be careful that we don't get involved in the movement. Oh yeah, we got more and more, and we start counting the numbers and forget the fact that people still need to grow. And it takes time to do that. You can't push growth. You can't. I've had kids. You don't push them to grow. And if you try to push them to grow and you try to get them to walk too fast, you damage their knees. Yeah, you can hurt your kids by trying to push them to grow too fast, right? You can do that. And so you want to just help people grow as they can, right? But the focus is on discipleship more than on the movement. Next. And then we have this preferred concept of discipleship. And this, the four pillars I've taught here before, the concept we have here is actually being in a systematic process of like 100% commitment to Christ, and very systematically, very intensely going to the Word, learning what you can, and then making a commitment to applying it. Say, look, this is what Christ taught, I'm going to do it. I don't care if anybody else does it or not, I am going to do that. If people can laugh at me, that's fine. I'm still going to do this because I'm committed to being a disciple of Jesus. I'm a disciple. Okay, so we're doing that. So commitment, studying his teachings and philosophy, applying it, doing it, and then functioning as an extension of Christ in the community. So everywhere I go, I'm representing Jesus. I'm just going to do that. That's my commitment. Okay, so we have the four discipleship pillars. Next. So the critical elements of being a disciple is like marrying this thing. Just saying, listen, me and the Word, I'm going to be doing it every day. And I'm actually going to do what it says. I'm going to do what it says. That kind of commitment, that's what we're looking for. I'm going to live in this. I'm going to study it, try to understand it. I'm going to do what it says. Okay, so, and then I'm going to share my faith with other people. Okay, next slide. Does that make sense so far? Have I confused anybody? Okay, good. So my wife and I went to P&G, and when we first went, our philosophy was planting churches. It took years before we began to realize we don't just need full churches, we need disciples. And we began to shift the focus of our ministry towards developing people, not just making full churches. And just before we left New Guinea, we began building a school. I don't have a little clicker with a red dot on it, but you'll see the building in the farthest back. That was the school that we were building. In fact, I was building that. Those of you who have heard me tell the story of being hijacked and put in the back of the car and threatening to kill me, I was getting material for that school when that story took place. So just provide a little context there. So we have that school in the very back, and then recently they built the two in the front and the small office complex, which is right in the middle there. We've got 2 teachers' houses. They'd be right on the side here. Right now I think there's 4 teachers' houses. We built one. We just chopped trees down to clear the space for the school. In those very trees, we took a chainsaw, cut all of our timber out, and used that timber to build the school and build the teachers' houses. I built one teacher's house, had a few guys helping me, and I knew I was leaving, so I said, listen, do everything I'm doing. I'm going to show you what we're doing. You help me. So we worked together. They basically built it. I was there coaching them as they did so. When I left, we got started on the second one, and when I left, they finished it, and they did an excellent job. I said, look, just do it exactly the same as we did that one. And they did, it's a good discipleship technique, actually. Anyway, so next. There's the 2 teachers' houses. I think we built this first one, and they built that second one. Again, they did a great job, and there's a couple more back there. Next. There's the new school buildings. Next. And we showed up, and they found out we were coming, and they made these 2 long lines. There's well over 200 kids there. When we were there, it was like 70 to 100 kids. And so they've got, 2 years ago, there were like 350. And now all of the students are here in this picture. But we're just happy to see, there's a few more, you can click through there. A few classrooms. Okay. I only had one picture. I put a few more pictures in for the school kids this week. That's why I'm thinking there's more. So there's a wife in the mud. If you can back up. This is all the trails look like this. They're all really muddy. And my wife and I, we just get used to having mud up to our knees when we walk places. And there have been a few times when this is flooded. And the last time it flooded, before we left New Guinea, the water was up to about here. We were walking through there, like the river had really risen. And I was walking at night, getting back to the house. And so we had, I don't know how much of this we had to walk through. It was quite a ways, but there's swamps around there with crocodiles in them. So the whole time I was walking, I had my flashlight looking for 2 little bright spots, just slowly, not trying to splash, just slowly walking through there, keep my eye. Anyway, we're walking through the swamp. Next, typical house, just a leaf roof. And they usually have fireplaces underneath the house for a very good reason, and that's because those leaves get full of bugs, millions of bugs, and they poop. And it's really easy for the bug poop to just rain on you constantly when you're in there. We used to get it in our ears and our eyes. You don't sleep with your mouth open. Anyway, they build fires right there just to kind of keep the bug population down. Next. This guy was the witch doctor. If any of you have read, I gave a copy of the manuscript of a book I'm writing, of stories from this area here. If you read the story about this guy, Peter Moy, in the chapter entitled "The Village That Died," that's the guy. He was the witch doctor. The village died, and everybody in it died. So they waited a little while. Then it was repopulated. Everybody died, so they waited a little while. It was repopulated. Everybody in the village died. Eventually, they're like, we got to find some way to survive here. So they thought, if we can get this witch doctor come, he's a powerful witch doctor. He's got these really strong charms. He can keep us alive. So they brought him down, and then they tried to resettle the community again. And then he gave his heart to Christ and burned his charms. And they were really upset. They didn't like the idea that he was burning all of his charms. And they said, no, look, like it was like a riot. Like, if you don't want the charm, give it to us. Like, don't burn it. And but he burned his charms, and they thought everybody would die as soon as he did that. Nobody died. Everything was fine. The village continued to grow, and they realized, look, okay, we don't need a witch doctor. We just need God to help us. Like, that was the message there. Anyway, I was just good to see him just a few weeks ago, and realize that he's hanging on. He's still trying to do, be faithful to God and do what's right. Okay, next. This teacher here, I want to point this out. One of the challenges we have in church planting is that we want people to think and function as disciples. The problem is, what happens if people are used to a model where you always have a pastor who gets paid? Okay? Back prior to 1932, the Seventh-day Adventist Church used a different model where the pastor was an evangelist. He went out there, planted churches, and got congregations started. That's his job. But as far as the local church concerned, who ran the church? It was the elders. Okay, they preached. And they managed the church. And then the pastor, he was an evangelist, church planter, did Bible studies. Like, that was his job. So what we need to do out here, we can't afford to hire pastors to take care of all these little village communities. So we said, no, each little group of congregation has to have somebody who's like leading out, right? And you don't always get paid. You do it for the sake of moving the work forward, not for the sake of filling up your pockets, right? So this guy, he was doing that. He did it for years, and then eventually he went and got certified. He's a pastor, and then he came back and was working, and evidently they wanted to move him to some other area, and he said, I feel called to work with my tribal people. There's no one to lead him. I want us to hear. And so he opted to stay there without pay to lead his people. And then they had the school, and this school was short of teachers. And he says, okay, I have to make a choice. Do I teach and be a pastor, or do I only be a pastor? He says, I have to do both. And they said, well, we can pay you, but we only have $16 a month that we can afford to pay you. He said, I'm using American currency equivalent, so normally a teacher would get paid like $500 a month. They're offering him how much? 16. He told his wife, like, what am I going to do? She says, look, we have to have some way to make money. If you're going to be a volunteer pastor on Sabbaths, and work with people, like, what are you going to do? Like, if you're volunteering, basically $16 a month, that's a volunteer job. Like, what are you going to do if you're volunteering all during the week? Like, we've got kids. They had 6. And you might say, well, it's their own fault they had 6 kids. But in this area, usually people lose half their kids or more than half their kids. If you want to have 1 or 2 children when you're old, you have to have 6 kids when you're young because of malaria and pneumonia and diarrhea and dysentery and boils and, like all the infections and accidents and pigs, and the list just keeps on, snakes, keeps on going, right? You have to have kids. Otherwise, the village will disappear, and that happens. So anyway, his wife says, look, we have kids, so how are our kids going to go to school if you don't make any money? He's like, I don't know, but if I don't teach, there's like 40 other kids that aren't going to get any education. So do we believe in education, or do we just believe in education for our kids? He's like, okay, so we believe in education. He says, so I have to work even if I don't get paid. She's like, okay, give me your paycheck. So he worked, brought his 50 kina note, his $16, gave it to his wife. She went down and bought a box of crackers, packaged up in 3 or 4 crackers per package, brought them back, sold that box, bought a bag of flour and some oil. She came back to the village. She made little bread buns, walked for miles down to the highway, sold them, walked for miles back, made some more, walked for miles. So that was her job. Every day, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, trying to earn enough money to pay for the tuition for their kids and pay for the financial needs of the family. So that's what she did for 12 years. 12 years. Every month she would start over. By the time the end of the month was there, she had the tuition taken care of. She had their food needs taken care of. She'd get her next paycheck of $16 and she'd go down and buy a box of biscuits. Makes me weep. His kid went to high school. His daughter went to high school. This is her first year. So she heads off to high school. His wife says, how are we going to do high school? Because it's a boarding school. Like, it's not cheap. You know, we still don't have any money. He says, God is going to sort it out. We've done our part. It's time for him to do his part. You know, and I don't know how they manage it. She just kept putting money aside. You know, they got her in school, you know. So I just love those people. And the point I want to make is faithfulness. You know, that she's doing what they know to do and just keep doing it, even if you don't get paid. You know, we need to be willing to work even if we don't get paid. That's what pushes discipleship forward. It's not just the paid pastor who moves God's work forward. It's the deacons and elders of the church, the deaconesses of the church. It's just the people of the church. Like, we all have to say, okay, what's our part and how can we do that the most responsibly and effectively possible? There's a training center. This is a different project sites. We moved across the country. This is among the Gogadala. And there's a missionary on the side there. He built this training center. The idea was they live in a tribal area just full of swamps and lagoons, little tiny pieces of land stuck here and there. People live on the land. He said, with our villages scattered all over the place and churches scattered all over the place, we need a central place where people can come and learn how to effectively preach. Learn how to effectively disciple other people, how to give Bible studies, how to study the Bible themselves, right? How to cook, how to keep their kids from dying. How do we prevent disease as much as possible? So we need a place people can come, we can help prepare them to be better disciple makers, more healthier disciple makers, how to effectively move God's work forward. So they built this, and we had a guy from the union come over, and he was there, and he looked at that building. He said, this breaks all precedent. We don't have precedent for this anywhere. No one's ever done this before. He said, but it has to be done. And he said, we need to do this more. And but we went there for the opening. I want to show you just a few pictures of the opening. Here's the library, and you see there's about 1,000 books there. And why do we have a library? Well, if you go to the public school and you ask the teachers, like, where's the library? I did that several years ago. I said, I just want to see where your library is. They pointed to a cardboard box on the floor that had a handful of books in it. I said, that's our library. And so people don't have access to books. So it's hard for them to learn how to read because there's nothing to read, right? So it's hard to get good reading skills. Anyway, there's a books there. Here's they had about 400 people show up that stayed with us for several days for meetings. I was a speaker. We had another guy speaker. I'll tell you about him in a minute. They slept in tents underneath the canvas. Next, there's the chief speaker, of the keynote speaker. His name is Philip Bucky. It wasn't that long ago. He was the most wanted man in New Guinea. They had a death sentence on him. They said, bring him in dead or alive. We don't care. We just want him apprehended and in our office. And I won't go into details, but he was not a nice person. And he ended up in prison. First, he had a death sentence, and then life in prison, and then eventually it ended up being 34 years. And after about 14 years, he did about half of that, and he was released. And but during the time he was incarcerated, he gave his heart to God. Someone gave him a copy of the Great Controversy. And he read it, and he was like, man, I want this book. He said, do you have anything else like this? They gave him a copy of the Desire of Ages. He read that. He says, okay, I'm in. They gave him Patriarchs and Prophets. I started doing Bible studies with him. And he was eating it up. And next thing you know, he was like the evangelist in the prison. And he was talking about God, giving Bible studies to people. He was like full of it. And just a great, great disciple maker. He reached out to another fellow. His name was Bonnie. And this guy was in prison. And so they began having Bible studies with Bonnie. Bonnie was, he's like, okay. He was eating it up. He's just, okay. And these, fascinating to me that these guys, when they're outside, all they can think about is evil. But you remove them from that. Well, they can't do that. They have lots of time on their hands, right? And now it's good for them to just say, okay, maybe there's something different than what I've been doing. And, okay, next slide. There's a picture of just a few people. You'll see there's more like other rows back here, people sitting there. There's the stage we operated from. Yeah, there's a group picture. One of the kids brought a pet with him. It's a Magani, like a small kangaroo. Next, cooking food. There's sack. Sack is basically those starch beaten out of the pulp of a tree. Like my son said, no. The God said, eat the fruit of the tree. Didn't say eat the tree, but they actually are eating the tree. Next, there's preparing meals. Next, more. Pathfinders, they were part of the whole thing. Next, I'm just going to show you, just going to go through it real quickly here. Just pictures of the people that showed up there. Okay, stop here. There's, again, Philip Vaki. Next. The other guy is a convert from another denomination. He just started studying the Bible and just said, look, this stuff is so biblically based. There's Philip Vaki again with his wife. She kept praying for him all the time. He was a bandit and whatever. She just kept praying for him when he was in prison. They kept saying, leave him. He said, no, I'm going to keep praying for him. God's going to work a miracle in his life. And God did. So there's the group out there. And, this guy, Philip Vaki, was speaking. And as he was preaching, I was sitting there listening to him. And he was talking about meeting this guy in prison. And when the time came for and studying with him, this Bonnie guy, and the guy wanted to be faithful. He was studying his Bible, learning to keep the Sabbath. And eventually the time came when Bonnie was going to be, discharged, let go home again. And Philip looked at him and said, listen, Bonnie, you have to be faithful, man. You got to be faithful. You can't give up. You can't say, okay, I'm free now. I can do whatever I want. You have to be a disciple of Jesus outside as well as you are inside. You can't quit. Like you gotta. Not only do you have to follow it, you need to share it. Okay, so that was what he was. And as he was speaking, I heard somebody crying out in the audience. Some guy just started crying. And I walked over and I sat beside him, and girls would hug each other. I didn't do that. I just put my hand on his shoulder. I thought, well, I don't know what else to do, So I sat there and he cried for a while, and the guy kept preaching. This guy kept crying, and pretty soon he stopped. He looked at me and he says, the reason I was crying is because it was so hard. He said, it was so hard. It was just so hard. It was Bonnie, the guy that he had been talking about, just sitting there. It was so hard. This guy went home. He's a prisoner. No one trusts the guy. They don't say, oh, wow, Bonnie's back. It's not like that. And Sabbath rolls around, he wants to worship. But nobody worships on Sabbath. So even for church, he worships by himself. And he's trying to be faithful, right? But there's no trust between him and other people. It takes years. Even for his family to accept what he's trying to do, right? So his family, he started studying, and he said, look, this is the Bible. It's what it says. I'm doing it, right? So are you sure you're not just doing some rebellious thing? No, it's not. No, look, you read it. And so pretty soon his family joined him. And he and his family worshiped by themselves for 13 years. He did his best to faithfully do everything the Bible taught for 13 years. Eventually, somebody looks at him and says, this guy is so different. He's not the prisoner. He's not even that type. He is so different. And other people are saying the same thing. It's like the whole community says, look, this Bonnie guy, he's not like everybody else is. He's not worse. He's better. So someone walks over to him and says, look, why? Why? We just want to know why. He's like, oh, okay. So he has his opportunity. After 13 years, he's able to actually begin talking to people. And they want to listen to him. And the first person that listens to him is convinced Bonnie's right. He's right. He wants to study the Bible too. And they want to start keeping the Sabbath. So when Sabbath rolls around, it's Bonnie and one other family. Because that guy brings his family with him. And then someone else says, look, you're worshiping with Bonnie. He said, yeah. He said, it's okay. Oh, okay. They go over and say, can we worship with you too? He said, yeah, sure. Within a couple of months, it went from being Bonnie and his family to having 120 people worshiping together. 120. During those years, he was faithful and lonely. People were watching him. People were watching him. When they found out, look, we could worship with him, the gates were open. And they were really open. So, a few more pictures here. That guy right there with the funny-looking shirt and a tie, the green and orange shirt, that's Bonnie. That's him right there. Next picture. That's Bonnie in front of an early group that came to meet with him. They had to put a shelter up, a roof up, so they could have space to worship without being beaten by the sun or the rain. That's a picture from the back looking forward. And not everybody's in the picture. But anyway, I just throw a few other pictures in here. This is the missionary kids' friends. They're all swimming. They live in the water. Like our kids live on bicycles and they live in the water. Next picture is the missionary daughter. Back up one. She's out there swimming with their friends. Okay. My wife and her friend. Some of you know this lady. Okay. Okay, next. We're leaving the area. So I want you to see this is what the place looks like. All the, lagoons out here. And then you get up in the mountains, and it looks like this, right? And then you move out of the mountains, and this is the Sepik. We're in the northern part of the island, and that's the Sepik River. And it just goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So to get up to where this picture is taken here, to get to that point, we flew into Wewak, and then we traveled about 5 or 6 hours in a truck on a really bad road. We got to the river, we got in the boat, and we traveled for another 12 hours on the boat. And then that got us here. Okay, so just so you know, this is not like a few miles from town. Like, it took effort to get here. So there's a church. There's a few more pictures here. There's inside the church on Sabbath. They had 130-something members that meet on a regular basis here. And that's what the attendance was the week before. That's what it was. We were there. It's like normal church service. That's what Sabbath school classes. They don't have classes downstairs where they can meet. They just meet outside. And it rains a lot. Again, how many feet of rain do they get there a year? They get 22 feet, which would be 250 inches or around there somewhere. Like, it's a lot of rain. Okay. So the grass church, or the leaf roof church you saw, it's low enough that when they build everything on posts, even their houses are on posts, because the water level is always going up and down. It can go up 10, 20, 30 feet over the course of just a few days. Like, it's always moving. And it is wet. So when the water is high, if you're in church, like you're standing in mud. And so they wanted to build this one, and they started raising money for this, get this, 12 years ago. 12 years ago, they started building this church. But, to get those iron pipes, for the trusses to build like a permanent church, the grass one, they have to replace every couple of years because the bugs eat it and it rots apart, and they got to build another one. So they thought, we're gonna do a permanent one. We don't have to replace all the time. We're going to put a cement floor in it. Well, you see all the rocks there in little piles? You know where those rocks came from? They had to get their canoes, travel for miles to get to like a mountain with a little stream, right? Where there's actually some gravel. Because where they live, it's all clay. So they get way up there to where there's gravel. They get the gravel, shovel it into their canoes, paddle back downstream, get to where this church is, they get the gravel out of their canoes, they put them in buckets or wheelbarrows, and then carry them up the hill to where they can dump them on the ground. And they go back down the hill, get back in their canoe. And I brought a few paddles here, just so you can see we've got a whole family's worth here. I think it's good to make things visible. There's an older kid's canoe. There's a dad's canoe. Here's a mom's canoe. Paddle. Okay, you'd think I'd be able to get that right. And the small child's paddle. So the whole family can get together, and they can go and get gravel. So how long does it take to get that much gravel? Like, they just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. Anyway, I just was really impressed. I just shaking my head. Here's a picture of the church. They start putting those trusses up. And they thought they had enough done. They bought the tin, thought they had enough trusses, and they brought they finally went down and got them, ordered them made them. They put them on the truck, and they had to put them on, like, tie different boats together, and put them on there, and then slowly make their way up the river. Eventually got there, and the guy that put them together and set them up, he said they had originally planned with them too far apart. He said it won't hold up. You have to put them closer together. Now they're 2 trusses short. So they've been working on it 12 years. Okay, so it's 8 minutes after. I'd like to ask you for a few more minutes. Do you mind? Okay, so I met with the pastors. That's part of my job. I need to meet and we just see. Okay, so what are we doing here to the work in the area? What's being done that's moving the work forward, and what's hindering work? What do we need to do to make it work better, right? And I wanted to know how healthy are the churches, right? And are we actually effectively doing discipleship, or are we just doing church planting? And if we have churches that are planted, do we have the forced self? Like, are they able to maintain what they're doing? Do they have the training and skills needed to propagate, to actually study the Bible with other people? Like, I'm trying to figure out what do we need to do to help them, right? I want to make sure we understand. That's my job. So I began realizing there's hardly any Bibles. Only a few people have Bibles. One of the fellows had a Bible in a plastic bag, and no covers. It had gotten wet. They get a lot of rain. It's easy if you're doing Bible study with somebody. You get caught somewhere. It gets wet, and or your canoe flips over. Something happens, and things get wet. So his Bible had gotten wet, and the covers had come off, and the pages had all swollen up. You know how they do when they get wet. He's very carefully drying them in the sun, 1 page at a time, to keep his. He can't replace it. So now he keeps his Bible in a plastic bag. It's the same Bible I gave him like 12 years ago. He's still got that same one, and the covers are gone. He's just very carefully. His village was burnt down. There had been somebody got angry. They burnt the entire village down. Maybe a few houses survived it, but they lost their Bibles. They lost all their Bible study material. What they had, anything they had, it was paper. It's gone. And so, and they've hardly. I asked him, "What training do you have? Like, how do you train your pastors, your elders to preach?" Because there's 14 churches and 1 pastor. So how do you train all the elders and all the other churches? We don't have any training. Do you have any materials you offer? No. What do you do for Bible studies? We don't have any Bible studies. So, like, if you're going to give like a Bible, like evangelistic series, and you're going over the doctrines, we just go by memory. If you just go by memory, yeah, we just go by memory. So, yeah, it's like if we like for the State of the Dead, like remember the verse in Thessalonians. And he said, sometimes we don't remember any text, so we just tell him what the doctrine is. Oh, okay. So they don't have, like, Bible studies. And their churches, again, have to be rebuilt every year. Only see the pastor because there's 14 churches. You do the math. They only see him a couple of times a year. And as we just began going over, I had a list, of concerns I wrestle with. Over and over and over, they kept saying, "Oh, we don't have training for that. we don't have any materials for that. We don't have any Bibles. And I thought, man, in spite of the fact they're hardly any Bibles, they're not getting any training, and there's like so far away out there, the church is still growing. Every Sabbath they have like 1,080 people show up. They have their names written down. Okay? 800 members, 14 different, there's 2 churches, and then there's like another dozen branch churches. They're trying to grow. They're trying. And I thought, okay, you're trying. These guys are working. They're doing the best they can. They're needing help, right? Needing help. So part of my job is to try to make sure that they get that help. But one of the things the reason I'm telling this story to you, because you're going to ask me, like, why are you telling me this story? I'm telling you this story because I really believe that as God's people living in the last days, we need to do the best we can with what we have. We need to do the best we can with what we have. We become a people that have so many Bibles. Bible studies, they're on the internet. We've got them stocked in the library. They're on videos. Like there's movies you can just sit down and watch. You don't even have to turn the pages, right? We have so much. The question is, what are we doing with it? What are we doing with it? What are we doing with it? And what I really feel a burden for, like when I go overseas, like I'm wanting people to work. Like that's my job. I want to train people to work, to actually be disciples, to get the work done. Like when I come back here, I speak weekend after weekend in different places. Like I'm wanting to inspire people to work. That's all I want. And not just to, when they think about what does it mean to be a Christian, I don't want them to think my job is to go to church. Like going to church isn't so you can hear sermons about the Bible. Going to church is where you go to get equipping the saints for the work of ministry. Like there's that part there. So what I'm here for is I just want people to realize, look, we have a lot. We need to be using it. And I want to encourage all of us to think of ourselves as not just a church member, but a disciple, like someone who's somehow involved. Like we're committed, and we want to be an extension of Christ in the community around us. Like that's what I want all of us to think. And preaching isn't just for the pastor or people that get paid. I was talking to the Montana conference president. It's a good friend of mine, dating back to the days of the mission fields. And I was talking to him this week, and he was just sharing with me that they're trying a new initiative in the Montana conference where they're placing the burden of managing the churches back on the shoulders of the elders and freeing up the pastors to do evangelism and church planting. And so they've got this training program where they're actually training their elders to do that. And they're wanting church members to see themselves not as church members, but as kingdom growers, right? So we could think different. And so anyway, so that's on my heart this morning. And I just want to encourage each of you to ask yourself, what can I do differently to help move God's kingdom forward? How can I do that? And if just want to encourage you to think that way. Sir? Yep. Is that what you're talking about here? No. Different place. We kind of need to know all these things. Yeah, I can. If the church be sponsoring this stuff, reaching out to all these people. Okay. Yeah. Good point. And if you'd like, I can get you pictures of that Zulu church. I'm happy to do that, but that's a separate thing. Thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, and it should be. Yeah. Good point. Thank you. It's 1:15. Every time I get up to speak, I know that when I'm done, I'm going to go home. My wife's going to say, "That was 55 minutes, and you said 45. She's a good wife. She wants to encourage me to be careful because it's easy to talk too much, to say, we have a pigeon term, mouse wada. Mouse water means like it just runs out like water, but like there's nothing, no substance to it, right? No content. Anyway, so she's good. She helps me with that. So I want to bring it to a close, but I want to give you 3 minutes. So I'm just going to be quiet for 3 minutes. I'd like to encourage you just to talk to the guy next to you or the lady next to you. Just ask the question. Yeah, you can do 3. Just ask the question, what can I do differently? Personally. So if you want to just tell the person, look, I listened to this sermon, and I just think, I can do this differently. Okay? And if you have a comment like as a church, I think it'd be good for us as a church to, just give you a chance just to think about that for 3 minutes, and then we'll have prayer together. Is that a deal? Thank you. About 3 minutes. I'll give you until it says, I'll give you to about 21 minutes after 12. Thank you. Okay, your 3 minutes are up. I see a hand. No, they're pigeon Bibles. Yeah, otherwise we could say, let's send them some Bibles. You can purchase them in the country, but they don't use English Bibles. They're pigeon. They have them there. They have them in WEWAC, which is they have a Bible society, the New Guinea Bible Society, and they have a pigeon Bible there. I'd have to ask when I was there, you could buy them for about, it'd be like $8. If we do that, you would need to mark CPIC or May River Bibles. If you did that, they'll use it for Bibles.
So we just mark it like you want both Bibles or as needed in different projects. It's a great mission for the church.
Yeah. But if you wanted to go specifically to May River, you need to say May River Bibles. Otherwise, they'll put them wherever else they need them, as opposed to. And this is a huge need, I think, in May River. Yeah. You get a tax deduction either way, right?
Yes.
No. Yes. You're saying no. Okay, so if that's the case, then you would need to have one check. You would need to send the donation directly to AFM, put May River Bibles on it, and then they'll send you the tax deduction. That's right, because if you do it at the church, you're getting a whole bunch of them.
You have multiple projects, multiple churches that need help. We talked about one this morning, probably one or two here. Is there any way that you can coordinate that so that there's not random gifts being sent, donations being sent, and maybe overlapping, but more effectively use the money into each project rather than too much into one or the other?
That's good question. And I typically don't make financial appeals from the pulpit. I just don't like to deal with that from the pulpit. I didn't mean to. I did not. Yeah, that wasn't not the intention. Yeah. Yeah, but it's probably, what we probably should do is just have a short discussion later, and then we can put it in the bulletin next week, or, like the little text message thing that goes out, just let people know what to do or where we can meet to discuss it. That way we don't manage it from the pulpit. Thank you. Okay. So just to wrap up, I'm just curious as far as discussion is concerned, would anybody like to just mention one thing that they personally feel like, you know what, I think I can do one thing differently based on what I've learned today? Okay, you want to mention just one. Okay, make a commitment to living on this, right? Yeah, I think that's a great commitment. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. And then, yes? Okay, thank you. Last one. Okay. Okay. And then as a church, so we challenge you with two things. One, what you can do personally differently. The next one is a church. So I'm just curious, just one thing, because of time, one thing you think, well, look, as a church, I think here's a place we can grow. Any comments, thoughts? Yes. Okay, so the one asset we do have is health education, right? You're saying, look, we can take this asset and we can use it to invest in the community. Okay. Yeah, I think it's good for us to ask ourselves, how do we take what we have and use it to best build God's kingdom? Let's close with the word of prayer. Lord God, we do live in a very critical time frame in there's history. I think there's a lot that needs to be done. We ask you to help us to see it, to look at it, to recognize that work needs to be done, and get a better feel, Lord, for how do we address that? How do we take what assets we have and use them to build your kingdom, to reach out to people, to have Bible studies, prepare them for your kingdom above, and how we can be faithful, not just church members, Lord, but to be faithful disciples of Jesus. And to trust that you'll walk with us throughout the rest of the Sabbath and guide us as disciples to the rest of the week for Christ's sake. Amen.